Deadly Doppleganger by Izeki Kaisuda. My family lives near the rock tunnel, where we'd get many trainers every day. My Pokémon move through the area as well, playing with each other, and just going about their usual routine. I always dreamed of catching my very own and journeying with it around the world. When I came of age to go on my own journey and follow my father's footsteps, I stopped in Cerulean City to stock up on items I would need for my adventure. It was there that I heard about something that would change my life forever. I was in the Pokemart when I heard two trainers talking about kidnappings and disappearances that had been occurring as of late. I listened to their talk back and forth, hearing that they thought that it was the work of a wild Pokemon. I thought that this was a bit of a stretch, seeing as I could find no explanation as for why a Pokemon would do something like that. As I was walking out, I noticed that it was getting dark. I decided that I would stay at my friend Shane's house before starting my journey in the morning. When I arrived, he and his mother were waiting for me, thanks to my parents calling them. "Hey Mark, how are you?" Shane asked. "I am okay. I'm going to be starting my own adventure tomorrow." I sat on the bed. "How have you been? It's been a few months." "I haven't been too bad. I went exploring yesterday," he started before pulling out a Pokeball and releasing the Pokemon inside. "I caught this near the rock tunnel while there. I watched as the red aura faded and a Ditto was revealed. I looked at it wide-eyed, finding it hard to believe that such a Pokemon was found at the rock tunnel. A glimmer found itself in my eye as I slowly reached out to it. Upon seeing me, the Ditto started to take shine. I thought it was trying to defend itself, but it started to reconstruct itself. I watched in amazement, seeing it take my form. Seeing this, I couldn't help but put out other things in front of it and watch it take the shape of different objects. My friend noticed the curiosity from me. "You seem to really like this Ditto, don't you?" he asked me as he would put the Pokeball on the nightstand. "This is my favorite Pokemon. I was planning to catch one before I started my journey tomorrow," I said. "Well then, why not take him with you?" he asked as he handed me the Pokeball. "I think you two will be a great team." I nodded in delight before taking him outside to play with him. After a full afternoon of play, my friend and I went to bed. When I awoke the next morning, my friend was gone. I thought to myself that he must have gone out to play with his other Pokemon while he waited for me to awake. When I went downstairs, I saw his mother. "Hey, where is Shane?" I asked before seeing a saddened face upon her features and seeing her watching the news. "What's this?" "Get out," she said in a blunt tone. "What?" I asked. "I said get out, now," she yelled. "Get whatever things you brought and get out." I stood there trying to come up with some sort of response to this sudden outburst. I decided there was no use to try and argue and walked upstairs to get my stuff before hearing what was on the news. We returned to our breaking story regarding the disappearances that have plagued us for the last few weeks. Another disappearance occurred last night. A boy named Shane went missing last night and has not been found. Reports state that he was seen with a young man earlier in the day who is suspected to have been the culprit. "If he is seen, please report him to the police immediately," the reporter said. I lowered my head in shock. I couldn't believe what was happening. I walked upstairs and pulled together everything I brought and grabbed the Pokeballs that Shane gave me. Putting it on my belt, I walked out of the house, finding Ditto on the porch. I shook my head and returned him to his Pokeball before walking off to the rock tunnel. Surely I would run into Shane while I was adventuring. While walking, I passed two trainers going to challenge Misty. As they walked by, I heard them speak in whispered tones about Shane's disappearance, as if they didn't want me to hear them. Weirdly enough, it only happened in the immediate area around the rock tunnel, which started to make me think about what was going on. Why only around the rock tunnel? What could be causing it? These questions circled around my brain as I got to the rock tunnel. While there, I met an aspiring trainer named Chris. During our conversation, the disappearances came up. When I had heard him bring it up, I figured he would try and ask about what happened to my friend. What happened next surprised me. "I do not think that the disappearances are made by a Pokemon," he said, looking at the ground. "I think someone is kidnapping people and somehow making them disappear. But who would be able to do such a thing? How is it no evidence is left behind?" I asked as I looked at him. "I do not know, but we can discuss it more in the morning. We need to rest if we're going to find the exit to the cave tomorrow," he said as he laid down. With a nod, I let Ditto out of his Pokeball and letting him sleep on my chest as I fell asleep. When I woke the next morning, I did not see Chris or Ditto. As I walked through the corridors trying to find him, I saw Chris's bag. Picking it up, I saw the straps were broken. What was this doing here? Thinking that something was odd, I continued on, but I also looked out for Chris and Ditto. I finally arrived on the other side of the cave, but found no signs of Chris nor my beloved Pokemon. I decided to head to Pewter City to see if Chris went to town to replace his bag. With any luck, Chris might have taken my Ditto to the Pokemon Center, so they could watch over him for me while I found my way out of the cave. When I got there, something felt off. I went to the Pokemon Center, but Ditto wasn't there, and when I tried to ask about Chris, everyone just turned away and didn't even look at me. With this, I decided that it would be best to go to the gym, simply get my badge, and go. When I got there, Brock wasn't there. When I tried to ask people where he went, they ignored me just like at the Pokemon Center. I didn't know what was going on, but I couldn't worry about that. I had to find Ditto and Chris. As I departed for Pewter City, I couldn't help but feel disdain in the eyes of everyone I passed on the way to the Rock Tunnel. As I walked back through the Rock Tunnel, I remember how I met Chris. The way we explored the corridors, talked about our dreams together, and played with the Pokemon. I sat there, preparing for the night I would spend here before going home for a few days. I thought to go back to where me and Chris stayed, and see if I couldn't find any clues as to what happened to him. I started walking back, only using a flashlight as my guide. As I walked down the long corridor, the flashlight went out. As I tried to turn it back on, I heard a crunch behind me. I froze in my tracks, unable to move. My mind raced with thoughts and hopes of what it could be. Surely there must be another trainer who is just passing by, or a Pokemon simply going about its daily routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. As I banged the flashlight on my hand, I was finally able to get it on. As I flashed the light behind me to see what was going on, I was met with the face of Shane. When I asked why he was here, he said he was worried about me and needed to talk about something important. "Where have you been, Shane?" I asked. "Why did you leave the house and let me get in trouble for it?" "Where were you a few hours ago?" he asked, as he looked at me with a serious look in his eyes. "What? Why do you ask?" I asked as I started to feel uneasy. "Misty disappeared," he said as my eyes widened with shock. "Security footage shows you there before she disappeared." I ask you again, where were you? "I was in Pewter City," I said, shocked by the news of Misty disappearing. "Brock disappeared an hour ago," Shane said. "Where were you when he disappeared?" "I was at the gym, about to challenge him," I said, thinking about the situation. "He must have disappeared minutes before I got there?" Shane lowered his head, a slight laughter hitting my ears. "Then what I was told was true." He then backed away as lights flashed behind us. When I looked around, men in black suits were standing in a circle around me. I looked at Shane, who turned away and walked away. I sat there, shocked that my only friend left would betray me this way, saying that I was to be questioned for my part in the disappearance of Brock and Misty. Unable to move, I simply stared at my former friend, who was simply walking calmly with the men as I was being carried out of the cave and put into the back of one of their cars. As we drove back to Cerulean City, Shane began to get farther away, as did the cave. I saw a smirk appear on his face before turning away. I turned back around for a second out of fear before looking back to see he was gone. I was taken to the police station where the questioning began. I looked at the two men, not able to say a word. "Where did you take them?" the first man asked. "We know you took them, and we have evidence of you at the scene before the disappearance occurs." I couldn't even begin to respond. "I asked where you put them. Tell me now," he stated once more before sighing. "Okay, you won't tell me about them? What about Shane and Chris?" My eyes widened as I looked up at him. I was too broken inside to respond. It couldn't have been possible. Wasn't I talking to Shane before the men showed up? "Wasn't I talking to Shane before you shined the light on me in Rock Tunnel?" I asked. "No, you were sitting there, acting as if you were talking to someone." "I watched you for 5 minutes before we initiated the arrest," he said. I looked at him in shock. I was talking to Shane, but they said there was no one? What was going on? Seeing as I still had the chance to prove my innocence, I brought up Chris. Chris was with me the night he disappeared. We went to sleep, and when I awoke, he was gone, along with my Pokemon, I said as his eyes narrowed. "So, you were with both subjects the night they disappeared. That sounds pretty condemning to me," he said. "You said I was talking to myself in the cave, right? Who did it sound like I was talking to?" I asked, hoping for an answer to all of this. "You sounded as if you were talking to Shane," he said before he looked at me. "But that would be impossible as Shane disappeared 2 nights ago." My eyes widened in shock once more. That means Shane disappeared the same day I started my journey. How is it possible that I saw him in the Rock Tunnel earlier then? I lowered my head, unable to understand what was going on anymore. The man sighed and walked out before the second man approached me. "Tell me, do you believe in doppelgangers?" he asked. "Why?" was all I could muster as I looked up at him. I believe that this was not done by a man, but by someone who can turn themselves into another using them as a scapegoat to escape, he said. Didn't you say in the cave that you were at the Pewter City gym minutes before you would have kidnapped Brock? Yes, I did. But what could be able to do this, I asked. What could possibly turn into someone and create this sort of chaos? Unless it's a Pokémon. The man looked at me with a blank face for a few moments before a smirk appeared on his face. So, you finally understand, he said as his tone became more cold and chilling. But now that you know, there is no way you are leaving here alive. I was shocked at this sudden change in his attitude. I backed away, scared at his words. What do you mean? I asked as he walked towards me. You see, you now know what you failed to see the entire time, he said as he lowered his head and smirked. What are you going to do to me? I asked as I watched him get closer. I doubt you could make me disappear without a single trace of evidence. Ellipsis. He stared at me before breaking into maniacal laughter. I stared at him, trying to find a way out. The only way was the door, and I didn't know if it was locked. Hoping for the best, I tried to make a sprint for the door before being tossed against the wall. As I fell to my knees, I lifted my head to find the man standing over me, his smirk reaching from ear to ear. Soon his form glowed and his shape started to change. I couldn't believe my eyes. I stood there, shocked from what I saw. Myself, standing right in front of me. As I backed against the wall, a thought suddenly hit me. Where was Ditto? I was watching this clone of me walking towards me. I finally put two and two together. Sadly, it was too late. My end was coming. I soon heard him whisper in my ear, "Your journey ends here." I felt a sharp jab in my stomach and fell to my side. As my world began to fade out, I looked up at him. All I saw in my closing seconds was the face of my favorite Pokémon, Ditto. That was the Deadly Doppleganger. Final thoughts? We have another Forgotten Leaf caliber story on our hands. One thing that really bothers me is that the characters do not talk like humans when interacting with each others. Who responds to, "How have you been?" with, "I am okay"? Who doesn't just say, "I'm okay"? Likewise, who responds to it with, "I haven't been too bad"? I don't think I've ever heard that in my life. I've only ever heard, "not bad." Many lines in the story just don't sound like something you would ever hear anyone say, and I really think that reading the story out loud would have fixed this problem. This is why I always recommend that people read their story out loud as they write or review it, to tell if it sounds normal. Even some of the non-character dialogue is written extremely awkwardly. The line, "He asked me," as I would put the Pokeball on the nightstand. Why is the word "would" there? It just doesn't make any sense. There was nothing wrong with "as he put the Pokeball on the nightstand" that would somehow get fixed by shoving the word "would" in there. How about, "I asked before seeing a saddened face upon her features and seeing her watching the news"? A saddened face upon her features. Do you mean saddened features upon her face? Because a saddened face upon her features doesn't make sense. The story is just full of this. But that isn't even close to the biggest problem. Large gaps of this story just didn't make any sense. Now, far too much of this didn't make sense for me to go over, so let me just pick my favorites. Mark stays the night with Shane as they both go to sleep. Somehow, by the time Mark wakes up, not only is Shane missing, but the news knows Shane is missing, and they already suspect Mark, who they do not even know the name of, and have pinned him as a kidnapper after what could have only been a matter of hours. In fact, Shane's mother isn't even aware of this until she sees it on the news, and upon seeing the news, instead of either questioning Mark on how he managed to kidnap Shane without leaving Shane's fucking room in the same damn house that she lives in, or asking him what's going on, not believing that it was him, like would be her reaction if she were at all sane, she tries to get no answer whatsoever, assumes he is a kidnapper, and tells him to leave the house instead of doing literally anything. She thinks this kid kidnapped her son, and she's just gonna let him walk out the front door. Even if the news showed footage of the Ditto as Mark taking him, and it didn't, by the way, Shane's mother still knows that Mark never left that room. Shane would have to get kidnapped by the Ditto during the night. They both left the house because of that. Mark is still sleeping in the room, and the mother wakes up, turns on the news without ever going into Shane's room, see that the news is staffed by fucking wizards who know that Shane is missing somehow, and then assume it's Mark without ever checking Shane's room once to see if he's in fact in there. Hell, for all she knows, a different Shane was kidnapped, and she never checked. Last notes, Mark must be the dumbest man alive. He spends more than half the story wondering what the fuck is going on, and even asks one of the men in black suits what could possibly turn into someone, when the first thing he ever saw his very own beloved Ditto do was turn into him! Also, can we please ban the sentence, "my beloved Pokemon"? Has that line ever been any good? That's it for this creepypasta. Tune in again next week when we tackle yet another video game creepypasta. If you want to write your own story, help peer edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the creepypasta section of my forum. You'll also find a link to the playlist of every creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up with me on my blog posts, join the Facebook fan page linked below. And if you want to support me and what I do, check out my Patreon page in the description. Remember that if you want to have your story read on the show, you must stay active on your post on the forum, as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.